evening, time travelers of the interwebs. I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly, and I hope y'all are ready for some parallel universe head scratchers. Question for everyone: have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix? I predicted the future, but nothing like we're about to talk about. Are these locations the gateway to a parallel universe? Number 5, Versailles. So the year was the ladies got a little bit lost searching for the chateau. Eleanor Jourdain, to be precise, were on holiday in France. They were both teachers at St. Hugh's College in Oxford and had set out to see the vast palace of Versailles, the center of political power in France until the French Revolution in 1789. They turned to visit Le Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the grounds given to Marie Antoinette, as a private retreat for her personal use. Gosh, can somebody give me a castle one of these days? The ladies got a little bit lost searching for the chateau, and it was during this interlude that they made history, even if only in some small way. They encountered several people in 1789 period attire, carrying out period-appropriate activities, and passed a handful of structures that had not existed since that time. Their unexpected visit to 112 years in the past culminated with an encounter with Marie Antoinette herself, sketching on the grounds of her chateau. Mrs. Jourdain wrote later that everything suddenly looked unnatural and unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry. There were no effects of light and shade, and no wind stirred the trees. They had reached the edge of a wood, close to the Temple de l'Amour, and came across a man seated beside a garden kiosk, wearing a cloak and a large shady hat. According to Moberly, his appearance was most repulsive, and Jourdain noted that the man slowly turned his face, which was marked by smallpox, and observed that his complexion was very dark. The expression was evil and yet unseeing, and though she did not feel that he was looking particularly at them, she felt a repugnance to going past him. A man later described as tall, with large dark eyes and crisp curling black hair under a large sombrero hat, came up to them and showed them the way to Le Petit Trianon. After crossing a bridge, they reached the gardens in front of the palace, and Moberly noticed a lady sketching on the grass who looked directly at them. She later described what she saw in great detail. The lady was wearing a light summer dress, on her head was a shady white hat, and she had lots of fair hair. So, okay, not me. Moberly thought she was a tourist at first, but the dress appeared to be old-fashioned, and it dawned on her that this was Marie Antoinette herself. After this, they were directed around to the entrance and joined a party of other visitors. The strange feelings and visions of the past had vanished. It was many months before the woman told of their strange encounters. Visiting Versailles sometimes later, the women were not able to find the landmarks that they had noticed during the incident. During their research, they thought they recognized the man by the kiosks as the Comte de Vaudreuil, a friend of Marie Antoinette, who herself had been thought to have been seen by Moberly, as I described. Within months, they'd published their account in a book called An Adventure, later published as The Ghosts of Trianon, and they were both respected academics who, didn't really want bizarre publicity, so they published it under pseudonyms, which I totally respect. And this is what, solidified the validity of this tale for me. They just wanted the truth to be out there without the fame. Their experience became known as the Versailles time slip, the Ghosts of Trianon, or the Moberly Jourdain incident, and it has intrigued researchers, historians, and enthusiasts of the paranormal ever since, myself included. No one's been able to explain what they saw. I believe both of them had abilities that most of us don't tap into, and they just wanted answers. Number 4, Drem Scotland. So we're going back to 1935 when this man was a wing commander, Sir Victor Goddard to be specific. He was instructed to inspect an inactive airbase located in Drem, near Edinburgh in Scotland. While flying over it, Sir Goddard found the airbase to be in a poor state, with cattle grazing on the wild grass that had now forced its way through the tarmac, and the entire place was just in complete shambles. Later on, while flying his plane, he got into a little bit of trouble thanks to the really bad weather conditions, and to avoid an accident, he decided to fly back to the abandoned airbase till the weather cleared out, just a smidge, for safety. As he approached the airbase though, the torrential rain oddly and very abruptly gave way to bright sunshine, when Sir Victor noticed that the airbase was not only in mint condition, but in use. He spotted mechanics wearing blue overalls working on the yellow planes parked on the runway, but he was unable to recognize a single aircraft on the base. There was no way the place could have gone from decrepit to fully renovated and operational in half an afternoon. And more importantly, these guys weren't wearing the khaki-colored uniforms that were a norm at the time. Also, the Air Force painted all of their planes in silver, not yellow. So he was completely baffled by who knows what was going on, and he got the shock of his life 4 years later when he happened to visit Drem again. And this time he saw everything he saw 4 years back in 1935. We're talking the same people in blue overalls servicing yellow planes, and he even found that plane and he could recognize it now. It was a Miles Magister. So my theory is that he accidentally flew into a parallel universe portal where time was ahead of us. Hey, I've said stranger things on here. Number 3, Northwest Florida. This tale comes from Dylan Smith, a now 20-something-year-old man who grew up in Northwest Florida. I know, obvious. It was a day when he, his cousin, and his aunt were all outside on the front porch playing, when 2 teenagers approached the group and asked if they wanted to see a castle. Yes, Yes please. Dylan knew this was bad news, but his cousin had to go see it, so they both agreed to follow. Ah yes, the good old following the leader approach. The crew went into the woods and walked along a trail for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only like 20 minutes away. And what do you know? There was indeed this beautiful, gleaming, majestic castle in the distance, looking like something you'd see in the movies. He described it as, "This place was made of heaven. It literally shined as if the group had entered a city of wealth." The younglings gave each other an excited look and sprinted home to tell their parents. The teenagers stayed behind though. They never chased or followed the runners, which is weird, but yeah, alrighty. The young duo told Dylan's mom about their adventures the moment they got home, and well, she reacted how you'd expect a mom to react. "Hey mom, we followed a group of strange teenagers into the forest and found a castle. How cool is that?" I know if I ever said that to my mom, I would have been grounded for eternity. And I feel like I was grounded most of high school anyways for nonsense that didn't really matter, as it was. The mom in this case rightfully freaked out and told the two younglings that their time playing outside was over for the day. Now Dylan has elaborated that his mom was also a strict mom, the type to never let him out of her sight for longer than a minute. And apparently even the door to the front porch was open, so there was no way two teenagers could have just actually taken the younglings into the wood, let alone anywhere without one of their parents seeing. It's been 20 years since this universe visit, and Dylan has spoken to his mom and his family about this multiple times over the years, and no conclusions have been reached otherwise. There's no church or anything nearby that the duo could have mistaken to be a castle, and Dylan has thoroughly explored the area as an adult in exasperation. He remembers the bad feeling in his gut, but also because he knew better than to follow strangers. But with that being said, the teenagers also just seemed like people who were genuinely excited about their discovery of a castle and wanted to show somebody else. Dylan is positive that the teens stayed at the castle and he never saw them again. Gosh, I wish I had discovered a castle when I was running through the forest when I was little. I think the scariest thing I found was dog poop that I probably lied to my friends was bear poop to scare them. Hey, what can I say? Northern Ontario is kind of boring. Number 2, Hocking Hills. This tale takes place in September of 2008 and happened to a young man named Tyler and his friend Sierra when they decided to spend a day at, a park in Ohio named, yep, you guessed it, Hocking Hills. He described the day as a nice, warm, late summer day, and they decided to make a full day drive and make a hike. Hocking Hills is apparently well known for several walking trails, a cave or two, and several waterfalls and running water/creek areas, so a good nature area. They started a walk at random and found that one of the trails had been washed out, so they had to take another path, which forced them to cross a road, and on the other side was a tall fire lookout ranger station, which doubled as a fire tower. The duo had seen a lot of people out walking that day, and a few hikers and backpackers had passed by on their treks, up until that point. They played with their phones a bit on the way to show each other, some pictures from a different outing, and noted it was roughly after noon when they came out of the woods and walked across the road. It was then that they noticed that there was caution tape all over the fire tower, and a pungent smell in the air, which they couldn't really identify. Also, the windows on top of the tower appeared to be taped up and grimy, and there was flies all over the area. Not fun. They walked past it, commenting on how odd it was, and continued down a seemingly new trail they hadn't seen on a previous walk in the area. The trail took them past the fire tower and then cut into the woodlands. As they walked into the forest, they took notice that no one seemed to be around. They also described feeling chilly without explanation, and that's where I would have called it a day, since it's usually a sign of bad stuff to come. Once again, that day had been very warm, as they had both worn very cool clothing, and when they entered the forest, it began to feel very cool. Much cooler than they expected, and they were both shivering as they felt the temperature drop. As they continued on, Sierra repeatedly pointed out that it was getting darker than it should have been, and they looked around and were only able to find trees as far as the eye could see, and there should have been a forest edge somewhere in the area, since it wasn't really that big, but aside from some hills and tall pine trees, there wasn't really an ending to the woods like there should have been. She took out her phone to use her GPS because she instinctively felt lost, but her battery was nearly gone, whereas Tyler's had no signal, the battery was also near dead, and was glitching to the point where even the time wasn't showing. It was only then, as the light grew dimmer as they continued on, that Tyler noticed it was very silent. Their footsteps were echoing, the leaves, grass, twigs, and breathing was also echoing. With nowhere left to go but ahead, the duo continued forward, going down a small hill on the trail and back up when it got darker. At this point, the world seemed to have gone from shadowy to near twilight darkness. That's not a vampire joke, I promise. Sierra grabbed Tyler's arm and started freaking out about how weird it got. And then the air grew chillier, and they had a feeling of something really wrong. They both took off running, looking for any kind of exit, and for some odd reason they never really thought to turn around. As they ran, they could hear their steps echoing off of the areas, as things just felt like they grew more and more gloomy. Eventually, ahead of the duo, down a small hill and back up on the other side, they could see two large bushes on either side, kind of like a trail gate. They made a mad dash for the bushes, and just as they pushed through the plants, something odd happened. They were nearly blinded by light as sound and warmth returned all at once. They stood at the edge of a place known as Old Man's Cave, and turned around to see the bushes were the same, but the area was different, brighter, not silent, and finally, warm. Both of them took out their phones, and the time had finally updated, as it was now 4 p.m. The normal trail would have only taken an hour to walk fully, so it was a loss of 3 full hours. Later, when they were walking past the trail where the fire tower was located, they noticed it was normal looking, and there was a blonde blonde-haired young lady with her hair in a ponytail climbing the steps. The windows were not taped and very clean, and no pungent smell. Jeepers. Number 1, Northern Ontario. For once, I didn't have to completely research a story. I just had to ask a friend. They were a little cagey with the exact town this took place in, so I'll let y'all use your imagination. My buddy Patrick's place was about 1.5 kilometers away from the nearest neighborhood, since his mom intentionally picked that house due to, the lack of neighbors. I can't say I blame her. It was tucked away on a back road with the woods surrounding it. Every now and again, he liked to take walks with his little brother, who at the time was about 13. On this particular night, they headed up the road and decided to try and find a new path through a new clearing that they hadn't discovered yet, when they noticed something a little shocking. Just off the road that led almost directly to the neighborhood, there was a brand new paved road. For reference, every road in that part of town was a gravel road, so seeing an out-of-place paved road was pretty unusual. They stared at it for a while, and came to the conclusion that it must have been made within the last few days due to the modern but slow growth of the town. However, they had no explanation for how they did it so fast. So you know what, guys being guys, they decided to explore it for a bit, and as soon as they set foot on the road, the air became notably colder, at least by 5 degrees. The road itself was made of black pavement, but had no dividing lines, and it was surrounded by some thick red trees that resembled redwoods, but they were too short and didn't really make sense for a region that is mostly populated by birch trees. Trust me, I climbed enough. They walked on the road for around 5 kilometers until they decided to head back due to it getting kind of dark out. When they got off the road, they felt the temperature go back up, and both boys agreed to return to explore more during daylight hours. Good. Very good on you. At roughly noon the following day, they set back out to explore this place, only to discover that the entire road was missing. Specifically, the trees that were cleared to make it had apparently grown back, with no sign of the redwood-like trees. They, even began to explore the woods once more, but only to find no sign that this ever existed. When they got home and asked their parents about it, they said they knew nothing about any new road work being done. Honestly, that would have been my biggest red flag as someone who used to live on the worst road in my town. Road work is never speedy, trust me, especially not in Northern Ontario. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I'd like to reiterate that I'm perfectly content living in this universe. Okay, I could do with more vampires and fairies, but the current timeline is working out pretty well for me. If you enjoyed my ramblings today, could y'all help this out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hitting the bell for more curiosities from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.